The second scenario is the collapse of the Amazon rainforests. Climate change is looking as if it has the power to destroy those forests, which are the greatest carbon sink on our planet. So if those forests start dying, the pulse of carbon released to the atmosphere will set us on an irreversible trajectory to a world that is really hostile to the way we live and who we are.
How would they die?
What we think will happen is that the plants, as carbon dioxide builds up in the atmosphere, the plants breathe less and less. This is a very simple view of it. But when plants breathe, they let moisture go back into the atmosphere, and that moisture falls again as rainfall over the Amazon. So if the plants breathe less and there's less rain coming in, basically we'll see very widespread drought conditions in the Amazon. And I was very concerned last year to see those very low water flows in the Amazon, because that's exactly what we'd expect from the first stages of this change. And eventually there's just not enough water for the trees to survive, so they die. And then the computer modelling suggests that anything's going to have a hard time growing there because conditions become so hostile. We may get some sort of semi-desert vegetation growing where there was once a rainforest. And of course all that carbon that's locked in the trees, because trees are made of carbon dioxide, is just released into the atmosphere and sets us on an irreversible trajectory. I hope it doesn't happen. This is a scenario. We have scientific concerns about it, but it would be an absolute disaster for life on Earth.
And the third scenario?
The third one concerns another greenhouse gas called methane. Vast amounts of methane are locked up in what's called clathrates, which are an icy substance that's found at the bottom of the world's oceans. And it's held in that form in the ice by pressure and temperature. So in the Arctic, for example, as temperatures increase, these clathrates become unstable and we may see a mass release of methane. Methane is 21 times more powerful than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. So if we saw a mass eruption of methane into the atmosphere, again we're set on an irreversible trajectory towards a hostile world. We know these sort of things have happened in the past. Predicting if and when they'll happen in future is extremely difficult, but they're the sort of things that we really have to be aware of as possibilities, and they should act as a great spur to us to reduce the burden of pollution in our atmosphere that may unleash these very severe positive feedback loops.
Tim Flannery, you talk about the golden toad and the cloud forest of Costa Rica.
Yeah. Well, look, that animal was really, I think, the first well-documented victim of this global climate change that we're about, or that is looming on our horizon. It was a beautiful animal found just up in the mossy forest, and the American Indians had wonderful stories about it. They didn't see it very often because it only came out a couple of weeks a year, and it was golden, of course, a wonderful animal. They believed if you ever found one, you would find great happiness, and they tell stories of one person who found such a toad and didn't know what happiness was. Another one just couldn't bear the happiness that he'd found. And a bit like us humans, really, we don't recognise the beauty and wonder of the world that we have, and we seem willing to trade it for such short-term benefits. But anyway, that animal is the leader in this extinction cascade that's now emerging. As you said earlier, half of the world's species may go extinct in the next century or two, and that would just change our world, ultimately impoverish it, destabilise it. And what a legacy to leave our children. Horrifying.
Tim Flannery, you write in your books about how you were a global warming, climate change skeptic. What changed you?
Well, I had studied geology, and good old Charles Lyell, the first modern geologist really, who wrote the Principles of Modern Geology in 1850, told us that if you want to understand the rocks, look at the world around you, and that's fine for many geological processes, but for climate change it just doesn't work because we've had a long period of climate stability. And so as a geologist I thought, well, if climate change, it might be real, but it's going to unfold over hundreds or thousands of years. What really changed me was the ice core record, this wonderful record scientists now have drilled out of the Antarctic ice cap and the Greenland ice cap, where we have a year-by-year record of the state of our planet and its atmosphere going back 640,000 years. And what that record tells us in no uncertain terms is that our climate can shift very rapidly from one stable state to the next with very severe consequences for life on Earth. And once you understand that simple fact, you have to be concerned about the current indications that we're getting from the world's climate scientists that we are approaching a threshold to dangerous climate change, and the time to act is very limited.
What's happening at the North and South Pole?
Oh, this is for me, the most disturbing thing. The ice cap at the North Pole has been there for 3 million years. Walrus, polar bears, many unique species have evolved in that wonderful environment. And of course it's an absolutely essential regulator of Earth's climate. It reflects a vast amount of heat, of energy back into space that doesn't then heat our planet. What we've seen starting in the 1970s, but particularly since 2005, is a rapid melting of that ice cap. And it's possible now that as early as 2013, there will be no polar ice cap in summer. And that will change the world if that happens. We cannot, I just hope that will not happen, that we've got a longer time frame to act. But all indications are it's melting with unprecedented rapidity. Once that happens, the North Pole turns from a cooling agent or refrigerator from our planet to a heater, because the ocean starts trapping heat energy. And then we see a restructuring, I think, of the whole of the Northern Hemisphere's climate systems. Now, how severe that will be, how it will unfold, it's very difficult to say at the moment. But it is one of the areas of grave concern for all climate scientists. In fact, when you speak to them, they find it hard to comprehend, really, what's happening. They keep hoping that next year things will get better. It's not at the moment. It is the great warning sign for us that all is not well, I think.
South Pole?
South Pole's a little bit better off. We're seeing melting around the margins and very severe melting on the Antarctic Peninsula. But because the South Pole is land-based and there's a very high ice cap, we're not yet seeing those profound impacts. And I just have my fingers crossed that we'll see ongoing stability there, because if we start seeing a severe meltdown at both poles, the changes would be astronomical.
The NASA scientist Jim Hansen is speaking in Houston at the Houston Progressive Forum, where you spoke a few months ago. He is a man, scientist, who has been silenced. As you point out, he's one of the winners, really, of the Nobel Peace Prize, because he's part of the IPCC.
Yeah, exactly. And what a great hero. That man has done more from a more difficult position than almost any other climate scientist. When he heads an institute at NASA run by the federal government, and yet he's had the bravery to speak out and try to be heard. And, it was extraordinary what happened to him. They put a sort of a media manager in place who had lied about his credentials.
Lied about graduating from college.
Indeed.
I think it was in 2003, so already he was, to say the least, rather young, less than half the age of Jim Hansen.
Can you imagine what it would be like for one of the world's leading scientists, who is revered by everyone, to have this pipsqueak who lied about his credentials controlling what he tells the public? Just appalling. And the countries around the world would, I don't know what they'd pay to have the advice of a Jim Hansen. It's the sort of stuff we all desperately need. And here in the country that actually pays him a salary and allows him to do his work, he's silenced. I mean, I honestly cannot see the sense of that. I can't see who benefits.
We're going to break again, but we're going to come back to Tim Flannery and ask him what it is like to discover a species. Also want to talk about the wars of the 21st century and how they'll differ from the wars of the 20th century. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. We'll be back with one of the world's leading climate change scientists in a minute.